Okay, so we're actually going to go ahead with this design. I chose from the two. This was the other one, and I thought this is just a lot more interesting for me. This is looking very symmetrical just in terms of profile, but I wanted to try it out with this guy here. Now, at this phase of the design, there's a couple of things that we need to consider and think about before we even start drawing this thing up full on. And that is just the basic geometry, right? When we're looking at something as complex as this, what is the general shape here? And if you think about it, it's actually kind of this triangular shape, right? More or less. And the top here is more or less a box with a smaller box and a round nib, right? Kind of looks like a chess piece, more or less. But when we're trying to draw this in perspective and doing a 3D design representation of it, I want to think about this in terms of just simple boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a box. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of draw my box in perspective. Okay, and then from here I want to then think about my general height here. And for those of you who are new to this, I highly recommend the Scott Robertson How to Draw book. He covers a lot of this great fundamental, foundational, stuff about perspective and rules. He basically taught me everything that I knew regarding design principles and a lot of these core foundational rules. So I highly recommend picking up his stuff. But from here, it allows me to just kind of plan effectively to really figure out the basic geometric form of this thing without having to rely on 3D or rely on like some crazy grid system. I'm just trying to figure out the basic geometry of this thing, right? And I'm just thinking about, okay, there's obviously another box here, and we're getting to a point where it's starting to get a little bit this is kind of the horizon line is up here, and this is kind of like our little nubbin. But what's great about this is that what I'm getting from this piece, in theory, this is actually just the front view, right? This is what I'm seeing. So if this is the front view, well, what's in the back? And how far does it go? And that's the benefit of drawing in this 3D space, is that I get to figure out exactly how far back all this is going to go, because I don't want to just end it and say, oh, it's a symmetrical thing and that's it, and that's what this design is made up of. That's boring, right? That's really boring. I want to really figure out, well, maybe this is like a larger structure, and back here there's something more bigger and more impressive. And so that's what I want to explore, addition to what's in the front here. So whether it's that or whether it's something a little bit more simple, but it's definitely more asymmetric towards the back and then more symmetrical towards the front, that's cool. And we got the little Buddha-like structure here, doing kind of this gesture and all of the other stuff, right? So once we got this figured out, I'm gonna then apply this to my design. Now, this is one point of view that I have. If you want, feel free to do different perspective point of views, and you can easily do that by duplicating. And I'm just gonna see if this works. This used to work when I would try to cheat my way into doing a new perspective box, but I'd basically do a much more lower camera angle, and redo the height. And the reason why I'm just showing you guys this is so that at this very phase we can figure out exactly what angle we want to go with when it comes to showcasing our designs here, because the other one might be too center, and I might want to show just more of the top of the design here rather than just kind of having it be dead center on in our camera eye or our eye level. So maybe this one serves as a better angle for this. I just use a stroke button there to do my circles or ellipses. It's a great tool for that. So now notice how this one is more of the top and this is more of the like eye level, right? So I'm probably gonna go with this one just because it showcases more of the design. And then from here I'm just gonna go ahead and start expanding off of off the back. So I'm going to think about how this can actually expand and be a different form back here. And I'm literally just thinking about just shapes. That's it. Nothing complex, nothing crazy, just shapes. And at this phase, I want you guys to just have fun. Don't worry too much about the exactness of your design just yet. I just want you to think about building blocks. That, like, I grew up playing with a lot of Legos, and this reminds me of the times that, you know, when I was designing, or not designing, sorry, when I was, you know, building castles and stuff out of Legos. There's something really simple and rudimentary about this exercise, but it's very forgiving because of the sense that, you know, we can just think about shapes and how to compose those shapes together, and that's it. You know, and nothing else really matters. You know, there's no details. It's just, oh, how do I make these cool shapes fit together, and that's it. If it didn't fit, we try something else, and that's all I'm doing here. And that's how I see, you know, this form of drawing is just like, oh, what if I put this shape here and this other shape? Will it look good? Maybe not. And so that's kind of the exercise here for me. Maybe there's something more extended back here that we don't see. Okay. Now at this phase, I'm not going to continue drawing this because this is just a block in or block out. However, I am going to start doing the overlay. So the overlay is where I'm going to draw on top of this, and I'm going to use this as my perspective grid, and this is where I'm actually going to start drawing. And I'm using just a flat brush here that has a little bit of shape dynamics and opacity, but for the most part I can get to some nice simple lines here, and I'm going to use this to start just drawing stuff out. Actually, let's go ahead and use this flat brush. Now the brush I'm using here for drawing doesn't have opacity, but it does have a little bit of an angle to it. just so that I can get some nice slight angled lines when I need to. But I'm literally just using this to draw straight lines. And notice I'm keeping my distance. I'm not zooming in because I just want to figure out my major shapes. And that's it. And I want to figure out exactly what this base is going to look like, right? So I know for a fact that here I probably have some sort of inset here. It goes up. It probably does something like this. And I have another piece that probably is going to protrude just a little bit out. Something like that. Or maybe it can be a little bit more shallow. And I'm just using my perspective lines to really figure out the dimensions. And it's just as simple as that. I mean, I know for some of you that's just starting out, you know, I'm making it sound a lot more simple than it probably is. You're like, no, it's not that simple. I mean, once you have your basic understanding of shapes, drawing shapes in perspective, this stuff is literally just, like as I mentioned, it's just Legos, right? So that's literally the way I'm treating it right now. It's just Lego building blocks. And I'm using this right here as a map. This is all that's ever going to be. It's just a map, a visual guide. And with this, I'm just going to try to see how far this can help me, right? And since we're seeing things in front 3/4, you know, we're starting to get just some transitional shapes that we normally wouldn't have been able to see from the 2D drawing. Drawing the head here, and then the neck. And I'm going to try to make this like not like a you know, a character gesture drawing, but obviously the statue is very architectural, so it's going to look a little bit more on the stiff side. So I'm going to try to get this blocked in as much as I can. Just so I can do the rest of the building. And then from here, it's like now it's thinking about, okay, well, how does all of this, how does this all connect? Or like, what does it look like, you know? Because now we're starting to see this in 3 dimension. And don't get caught up in any details just yet. It's just the basic shapes. It's all I want you guys to just consider at this phase. Nothing more. I'm thinking at this phase, maybe this bit here protrudes out more. Maybe it's not so flat as we imagined. And because it's 2D and it's not in perspective, like we wouldn't be able to make this, you know, this understanding, right? Until we understand the overall geometry. So that's what I'm doing here. Because I'm pulling elements from it. And the thing about this is that, you know what? The drawing is just a visual map, right? And what I'm drawing here, this is what I'm saying that's going to be the final design, the final layout. Because this here, it's all interpretive, as we mentioned before. It's all interpretive until we make it what we want to make of it. And I know it seems like, oh, but we're cheating, you know. It's like we set all these guidelines and rules. I mean, and the rules that we set are for ourselves, right? And so that's kind of the beauty of it, is that the guidelines that we literally set are just for rules for us to follow, and it's also rules that we can break to help make the image better. That's all it is. And I'm just still thinking about the shapes. No details just yet. And even though that the geometry of this, what I drew in the perspective, is telling me one thing, you know, it's just a guideline, right? If I think that the design looks better pushed in some areas, then we should follow our instinct and really alter that and make it look good. And I see this like bottom part here, and it makes me want to just open this up a little bit. Seeing if I can actually make this front right here look a little bit more interesting instead of so flat. I thought this was a little bit boring, so just introduce a little bit more angles here. And the side here it's all free game, it's all free range. Here it's kind of like, you know, whatever we want to really put, because we don't see that in the front or in our 2D drawing. I know, you know, we said no details just yet. Sorry, but yes, we should continue on with just thinking about the simplicity of the shapes. just some big open flat surface here with these spheres that I'm going to draw in here. And I'm just using the marquee tool to kind of block these in. Really simple. Very effective way to kind of do these like little circles. Okay, so at this point, we see this is what we started with, and this is what we're starting to end up with, right? So it's such a good block-in for us to really start thinking about the overall form, which is this here, and now we can just focus on the design. Now here, I'm not going to completely take away the underlay, but I am going to decrease the opacity layer so we can just focus on the actual design here. But I'm using, actually I guess we can take it away. I mean, there's enough lines here. You know, keep the underlay only to kind of make sure that your perspective is in line. I have enough visual hints here that it's telling me, you know, I gotta stay within certain boundaries. But I think we're at a good point here to be able to start designing and doing all the nice little details. And you can see that I'm constantly readjusting this thing, and the reason why I'm deciding to pull it in a little bit is because I don't want a repeating protruding element out here and a protruding element out here. It just kind of makes it look not as impressive in the back. So I'm thinking like maybe one area should be protruding, so I'm just gonna kind of pull this in a little bit. This has always been the hardest part for me, is figuring out the small little decisions, because the big decisions have been made, and now it's just all the small stuff, all the little tiny little details and all the stuff like that. Which it's not the hardest part of image making, but it is very time consuming if you're very picky and you want to make a really good image, or make a really cool design. Then there's a lot of revisions that you'll find yourself doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and detail this guy out.